and will not allow illegal and dangerous activities to continue. The Emergencies Act will also allow the government to make sure essential services are rendered, for example, in order to tow vehicles blocking roads. In addition, financial institutions will be authorized or directed to render essential services to help address the situation, including by regulating and prohibiting the use of property to fund or support illegal blockades. And finally, will enable the RCMP to enforce municipal bylaws and provincial offences where required. This is what the Emergencies Act does.
So let's recap. The greatest violation of civil liberties in Canadian history has been the lockdowns. When there's a peaceful rebellion, really 100,000 protesters from coast to coast, not one act of violence. Have you ever heard of anything more peaceful in your life? Trudeau cracks down on it by removing due process and targeting the finances of anyone who supports his critics. He's introduced Bill C-11, an internet censorship law. Is there a real threat to security in this country? Well, let me read to you the definition of a threat to security. This comes from the Emergencies Act, which is the definition used in the Emergencies Act. Let me read it to you. I'm going to just read a little bit. Threats to the security of Canada means A, espionage or sabotage that is against Canada or is detrimental to the interests of Canada or activities directed toward or in support of such espionage or sabotage. Obviously, we're not talking about espionage, so it's not that. B, foreign influenced activities within or relating to Canada that are detrimental to the interests of Canada and are clandestine or deceptive or involve a threat to any person. Trudeau would probably say that having some foreign citizens chip in a few bucks to the crowdfunding for the truckers meets this test, but that's clearly not what this law was designed for, that some crowdfunding chipped in for the truckers. That's not a national emergency. It's not a real threat. C, activities within or relating to Canada directed toward or in support of the threat or use of acts of serious violence against persons or property for the purpose of achieving a political, religious, or ideological objective within Canada or a foreign state. There's been no violence at all, let alone serious violence. And then the fourth definition of a threat is activities directed towards undermining by covert unlawful acts or directed toward or intended ultimately to lead to the destruction or overthrow by violence of the constitutionally established system of government in Canada. That's a violent revolution. And look at this, but it does not include lawful advocacy, protest, or dissent unless carried on in conjunction with any of the activities referred to in paragraphs A to D. So forgive me for getting into the law there, but those are the four definitions of a threat to Canada. None of those are met. The truckers have not engaged in serious violence. They've engaged in no violence. There is no violent revolution. There's no foreign espionage. The only foreign element is some Americans thought, here's a few bucks for the truckers, but the money was not covert. It was to help the truckers with gas money and food. This is not about a true threat to Canada. It's not about a true threat to safety. It's about Trudeau using a pretext to go against any political opponent who uses crowdfunding or cryptocurrency. Well, who do you think he's thinking of when he talks about crowdfunding? I think that this is a very dangerous time for any critic of Trudeau. And you can imagine we're going to fight this in any way we can, and we're going to consult our lawyers to see what can be done in the face of this violation of civil liberties. I regret that little can be done because these extraordinary powers are there for the government to use for a 30-day period. I believe that it will be extended. And I believe that Trudeau's invasiveness into the finances of his political critics will be extended. And I don't have any confidence in the federal Conservative Party to stand up to this. I think that they're still so shell-shocked and they're still so obedient to the media party that I don't know if they'll stand up firmly. I think that this is in keeping with Trudeau and his family. I mean, Justin Trudeau has always said he admires authoritarian regimes. He's never hidden that. I mean, you might recall this unguarded moment that he has never recanted. When he was asked a few years ago what country he most admires, he said China, because it's a basic dictatorship.
He was asked which country he most admired and referred to China.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say, we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that
wasn't a one-off. Trudeau's brother, Alexandre, made a propaganda film produced by the dictatorship of Iran. His whole family loves Castro. And I'm not getting into the theory that Fidel Castro was actually Trudeau's dad. I'm not getting into that. I'm saying he's at the very least a father figure that the family admires and looks up to. Pierre Trudeau took his sons to the Soviet Union and said that Siberia was the future of the world. And even to this day, Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland, who serves on the board of the World Economic Forum, meet with George Soros. These are authoritarian people. I think that this invocation of the Emergencies Act is a kind of color revolution, if you know what I mean by that. A color revolution is the name given to these revolutions, typically in Eastern Europe, financed by George Soros to topple a regime that George Soros didn't like. Well, here in Canada, Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and half the cabinet, according to Klaus Schwab, is part of the Soros World Economic Forum. That's not a theory or a conspiracy theory. It's just a fact. Bizarrely, Chrystia Freeland sits as a governor on the World Economic Forum, even while she is a deputy prime minister and finance minister. I think that as this trucker rebellion spread, Trudeau got into trouble and he pulled a color revolution against his own people. It's very upside down, and it's still going to take me some time to chew over. I'm recording this shortly after Trudeau made this announcement. And of course, he left the most abusive parts to Chrystia Freeland of the World Economic Forum to say. I'm worried about this. I don't think that this Emergencies Act was necessary for true law and order. I think that Trudeau's dark authoritarian side is showing. Looking at the media questions, there wasn't a single skeptical question other than, why aren't you going harder? I think that every institution in this country failed. That's why the Truckers' Rebellion filled the gap. Finally, people were standing up, people who were not compromised. This is designed to smash that, but not as a public security threat. It wasn't a public security threat. This is designed to smash anyone who dares to challenge Trudeau. And if you dared to chip in even $10 to the Truckers Fund, that you're going to be in Trudeau's social credit list as someone who's done something illegal. I fear that we are heading down the path of authoritarianism.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.